All right, moving on, continuing 7B in the instructions, we're moving on to the hull sides, and this one, of course, is the starboard side. Now, you can see it's got some of the greasy film on it from the release chemical that they spray in the molds, so I'm going to give it a good wash with some hot soapy water, and then we'll be able to put in the photo etch piece. Alright, so I washed it in hot soapy water, and as you can see, that kind of a slick, greasy film is off. That way there the paint primer and the paint itself will stick better. So now we'll prepare the photo etch pieces to go into the little port on the side. Alright, so the photo etch piece is in, the doors, and then the little ring that goes on the outside. This is not to take anything away from the model either, because the detail on the model itself, the door is pretty nice. So the photo etch just adds that little, oomph, that little extra. But we're going to wait for this to dry thoroughly. I used the Plastruck Bondine on it. And once it's dry, it'll be all set where we can prime it. Alright, so I gave it a nice coat of primer, and it's all dry. And I use the Bullseye 123 gray primer. And I'm going to flip it over, and I'll give the outer side a coat of primer. Okay, so the primer had a chance to dry, and it's looking pretty good, well coated, nice and even. So now we're going to go ahead, we're going to put the finish coats on, and the inside I'm going to be using the bright white, and I'll do the inside first, and then when that's done I'll show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so it's had its time, and it's dry. It's nice and smooth, and nice and reflective, so it can reflect all the lights that are going to go in. So now I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to put the finish coat. And of course the finish coat I use is, I love the Rust-Oleum. I think it does a really good job. It puts a super protective shell onto the model. And I'll show you what it looks like when it's dry. Okay, so now we had the time, and the paint is cured nicely. Got a nice shell, nice and smooth. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start applying the paint masks for the Aztecing. So we're ready to start applying the masks, but we need to prepare them first. So the space of paper that has the masks on it for this section, as before, we begin by removing the material around it, and I'll show you what that looks like. Alright, so once the material is removed, you put on a piece or a section of the frisket or the tape that came with the kit, the masking kit. Then you cut the shapes out, and what you're going to do next is you're going to peel off the backing, and they're going to be getting ready to be applied to the ship itself. So that being said, I'll take the backs off, and I'll put them on and then I'll show you what to do next. Alright, I got one part on, the top part. Now when you peel the backing off of this, it's a good idea to remember you start at a corner and you peel it a little bit at a time and you run your fingers down. And I got a tool here to help hold down the mask while the other hand peels away the backing. Kind of the same way you're going to do it when you're taking off the frisket or the tape off of the mask itself. So I'm going to remove this part, the backing, and I'll put it on and I'll show you what it looks like. Incidentally, you probably want to take off the tape before applying the second one, just so it doesn't overlay, just in case it's the frisket or the tape is, bigger than the mask itself. You don't want to knock it out of whack. But once the tape is removed, and you can see the mask is on, it's all set for the sections to be removed for the painting. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to take the backing off this one, and I'm going to apply it on the hull, and then I'm going to remove the tape and show you what it looks like when it's ready to start removing sections for painting. I can't stress enough, be very patient because this is very time consuming. I wish I could show you, but I don't have those fancy cameras and the tripods where I can actually remove it and videotape it for you, so I'm going to have to show you the after effects. But you start by one end, you take a corner and you gently start peeling it back at an angle, and you use a tool or tweezers to hold down the sections while you're peeling back the backing. Like I said, it takes patience, but just remember the end result is going to be really worth it. So I'll show you what it looks like when the second part is done. Okay, once all the tape is removed, you can go ahead and fix the little sections. Now, I'm still relatively new to doing this, and of course there are a couple of sections that came off with the tape. I tried to get it, but the little pieces, it's funny how they jump. They just seem to jump and disappear. But this is all set to start painting, well, removing the sections. And of course, like I told you before, you take a piece of wax paper. For every section that you remove, you mark it with a magic marker, and then you do that color and let it dry, and then you can reapply those masks. The marking is to let you know that you've already painted that section. Okay, so I removed sections of the first color. I put the sections on wax paper and I kept them kind of ordered, like the panels I came off of, just to keep them organized so you don't lose track. And then I used a permanent marker and I marked them, just so when you put them back on, you'll know the sections you already painted. So let's see, what color am I going to do first? Well, I think I'm going to do the blue first. So I'll use the paint gun and I'll spray the blue, and I'll reapply the masks. Alright, so the blue is done, and I put the sections back on. And I'm going to take off the sections for the next color, which is going to be the green, and we'll see what that looks like. Alright, so I sprayed the green and marked off all the pieces that came off, so I'm going to put all the pieces back into place and take off the sections for the next color, which will be red. So I just sprayed the red, And you gotta be careful with these pieces, because when you take them off, sometimes the little pieces like to blow off from the pressure from the paint gun. So if that happens, you just gotta keep track and make sure that you don't repaint that section. So once the paint dries, I'll put all the masks back in place, and then we'll do the gold, and that'll be the last color. Okay, I just sprayed the gold, and that was the final color. So I'm going to let that dry, and once that's dry, I can take all the masks off, and we can see what the pattern looks like. Okay, so we took the paint masks off, and it's had a chance to set, and we'll do a little bit of the cleaning, a little bit of the adhesive made line marks. But that being said, we can move on to the internal wiring part. And just like the port side, we're going to put, well, I'm going to put a 3mm bulb in to light the pylon nacelle. And I'm going to use a light strip that's going to go in over here. So we're going to prepare the bulbs, well, the bulb, and it's got to be soldered, and I'll show you how to get everything ready to put in. Okay, when preparing your LED, in this case, this is a 3mm LED for the nacelle pylon. Remember, you can't just directly wire these, you have to put a resistor in. And the resistor will always go on the anode side, which is the longer version of the leg. The shorter one, of course, is called a cathode, but the resistor must be soldered to the positive side, which is the anode. Otherwise, your bulb will burn out and it won't last. So I'm going to go ahead. By the way, make sure you got your flux, because that'll keep everything nice, and it'll help the solder stick. It'll make your life a whole lot easier. So let me go ahead and solder this into place, and I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so the resistor is on the anode side, and what I'm going to do now is I cut a piece of wire, well actually 2 pieces of wire, red and black, to keep track so they don't get confused when they're in the ship. And these are going to go onto the leads. Of course, the red is positive and the black is negative. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to solder them on, and then I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, once the wires are soldered to the leads, you may or may not know, these sides, the cathode and the anode sides, are not allowed to touch, otherwise they'll short circuit, bypass the resistor, and they'll burn out your bulb. So what I like to do is I like to take some electrical tape and cover the leads. You can do this with any kind of tape, it doesn't have to be electrical. They even have the tubing that you can run over it and shrink it with the heat gun. But I'm going to use electrical tape. And once everything is all set, then it's going to be ready for us to test the light. Okay, we got the leads taped up, and we got the leads for the alternate power supply to test. So we'll go ahead, we'll flip the switch, and the light's on. This is going to be the light that's going to illuminate the beautiful nacelle pylon on the starboard side. So now we can go ahead and we can move to the light switch. The light strip. Okay, so I went ahead and I cut the light strip. You can see where the little scissors are and the little leads. It tells you where the best place is to cut the strip. Now, let me show you. When I did the port side, I did 6 squares of light. So I want to keep it even. So for the starboard side, I counted out 6 and I cut it. So now what we're going to do is we're going to wire the leads. And I did the same thing like I did with the LEDs. I got black wire and a red wire. Of course, red goes to positive and black to negative, and then you solder it onto the leads. And I'm going to show you what that looks like when it's done. Okay, so you can see I soldered the leads on the other side, red positive, black negative, and I put it to a temporary power supply. As you can see, the lights work fine. So now the lights have been tested, they work, so now we can go ahead and we can hot glue them into place on the inside of the hull. So I got the lights in, everything is hot glued into place, had a chance to set, and it's always a good idea to angle the wires to going towards the front of the hull so it can come out where the deflector dish goes so you can keep track of all the wires. So let's test it out. We'll hook it up to a power supply and see if it works. Alright, so I got the power supply just to test it out, and you can see the light for the nacelle pylon is working, and the light strip is glued into place and working fine. The wires are anchored, and all that's left now is we can put the decal with a little docking port in the front, and then we can move on to the next step. Okay, so we got the decal on, and it's all set to be cleaned up, and everything is tested. So now the starboard side is done.